And joining us now from Capitol Hill, Senator Bob Menendez, a member of the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. Senator, your reaction to what Mr. Dudley just said?
Well, I think that BP is in a public relations campaign and a spin control. I don't have a great deal of faith in what they have to say. They filed documents with the federal government that said that they were ready for the worst case possible disaster of any potential spill. And it seems to me they're simply a company flailing from one attempt to another to figure out how to shut down the spill. And that, to me, isn't a planned response. I think they parse their words when they talk about their responsibility on liability. There's, company executives came before the committee and said legitimate claims, and when we try to pin them down on legitimate claims, wouldn't define that. And then, can't get them to agree to raise the liability cap. If you're willing to be liable for all consequences of the damages created as a result of the spill, then if you're saying that, then you should be willing to raise the liability cap. So I have a real problem believing in the credibility of BP.
And what about the federal response?
Well, I think that the federal response has been very good overall. I do think, however, that MMS, the Mineral Mines Management Service, which leases out these oil leases throughout our country, both on and off land, has real challenges to it. I think they failed in a whole series of cases to make sure that certain environmental assessments that should have been a prerequisite, they basically did away with that. NOAA, the National Oceanic Administration, basically said that they complained about it in a written letter and said that MMS underestimated the potential consequences and possibilities of a spill. I think that is all ripe for review and looking at that federal entity to be responsible as well. I think it's much too cozy a relationship with the oil industry. You can't be the oil industry's promoter and its regulator at the same time.
What are your concerns about the oil moving up the coast? We know that some of the oil, the tail of the oil, is in that loop current. Mr. Dudley seemed to minimize the possibility of that. What is your best information?
Well, he deminimizes the amount of oil being spilled. I don't believe that their estimates are correct. He deminimizes the consequences to wetlands and how easy it will be to resolve it. And Senator Nelson, the senior senator from Florida, on the floor the other day said his worst nightmares become true, that there are tar balls in certain elements on the Florida Keys. So, it just seems to me that there is a real natural consequence disaster here. It is a man-made disaster. I don't like hearing about industrial disasters. It's almost like, again, offsetting the responsibility.
Right.
This is a man-made disaster. It is man-made by BP, and if we look at some of the reports that have come out, it seems to me they cut a lot of corners to get this well productive, and at the end of the day, we're all paying the consequences for it.
Senator, what would be the impact of your moratorium on offshore drilling, and do you think you can get that passed?
I think we can. The White House has called for raising the cap. Secretary Salazar agreed that the cap had to be raised. Even some of my Republican colleagues suggest that the cap has to be raised. Now, our desire to raise it...
And a moratorium on drilling? A moratorium on the moratorium on offshore drilling, is that likely to be passed as well, do you think?
I think the cap will be raised, yes, that will be done. The moratorium, I hope we can. We certainly should not permit one new lease to take place off the coastal waters of the United States until we fully know whether this is actually something that should be pursued. The Energy Information Administration that tells us our resources tells us that if we drilled everywhere, East Coast, West Coast, all of the Gulf, out in the Arctic, that we would have 3% of the world's oil, but we consume 25% of the world's oil. So it's a drop in the bucket. We don't keep that oil domestically because it's an international market. So we have to think about the multi-billion-dollar consequence to our energy, to our environment. In my home state of New Jersey, a $50 billion tourism industry. If we had this oil on the beaches of New Jersey, we'd be affected in the billions of dollars. Years ago, we had medical waste come up on the beaches of New Jersey. It took us years to recover from that. We cannot afford that in New Jersey, or for that fact, many other coastal states.
Senator Bob Menendez, thank you very much.